My Schizophrenic Life, The True Story of Tracy Poe, Part 8 College, Chapter 35 San Jac. I caught an airplane out of Honolulu International Airport and made the 5-hour flight to San Diego Airport. I caught the 3-hour flight to Houston. When we were taking off, I had a window seat and could see the Marine Corps recruit depot passing by. I thought those poor souls do not know what is in store for them. I landed in Houston and was picked up at the airport by my mother and father. Many of the young people in my neighborhood had become Pentecostals. Pentecostal women had to wear long dresses as part of their religion. Some old friends came to see me after I got home, and these young men were Pentecostals also. The young ladies would run the streets of the neighborhood in their long dresses out at odd hours of the night, and I thought they looked like witches. One of my friends named James is still a Pentecostal preacher to this day. Greg, my friend David's little brother, had a Pentecostal girlfriend, so he was basically a Pentecostal also. The men wore dress trousers and dress button-up shirts, but still ran the neighborhood at night. It was beyond strange. After a few days, I borrowed a car from my parents and went to a small bank in an odd building across from Alameda Mall. I went in to open an account with my check for $4,573.80, and the banker told me that I did not want to get an account there because they would put a hold on my check and I would not be able to access the money. So, I left, and the next day went to Pasadena, Texas to my father's bank and opened an account. When the check cleared, I bought a used Toyota Celica I found in an Auto Trader magazine for $1,800. I had seen Toyota Celicas in Hawaii, and I always liked the way they looked. The man selling the car met me at Alameda Mall at his bank to transfer the title. The lady put $1,800 in as the price, but the man said to just make it $1,000, so I did not have to pay as much tax. The lady at the bank changed the form. I paid him the $1,800 cash as we sat there. I took the title form to the DMV, Department of Motor Vehicles, to register in my name, and the clerk rejected the form because the lady at the bank had changed the amount. So I went back to the bank and had to get a new form, then back to the DMV to register my new car. I was home a few days and my father started hounding me to get a job. Rick and I, my neighbor whose house I sat on the roof of when I decided to join the Marine Corps 3 years earlier, went around to some restaurants near my home and we put in applications. I got a job at Pizza Hut as a production professional. I know now that the large pepperoni pie has 52 slices of pepperoni on it. I registered for college at San Jacinto South Junior College for the spring semester. I went through the long lines of registration and had to do testing as I only had a GED, high school equivalency. I had to take introductory algebra and introductory English courses because that is the level at which I had tested. I also took drama as an elective. I got my class schedule and went to pay, and it was more than it should have been. It was a lot more than it should have been. My father was paying for my college and my mom had given me one of her checks to pay with. I asked why it was so much and the counselor checked and said I was out of the district. I had to go back to the beginning of the line to pay and wait all over again to get it straightened out. But I got confirmed that I was indeed in the district and paid with my mom's check. While in the Marines, I had maxed out the money I could put into VEAP, Veterans Educational Assistance Program, which paid 2 to 1 the money you saved in that program. I should get $300 a month to go to school with that program. School started after the new year in January 1986. I quit my job at Pizza Hut so I could focus on my studies. I cannot spell, and I have messy, illegible handwriting. I asked Gilbert, my next-door neighbor who was a computer programmer, about what computer to get, and he suggested an Atari. So, I got an Atari computer. You could not turn in college work on computer-printed paper, so I got a Selectric pinwheel computerized typewriter. Gilbert told me to get First Word software, which was a computer word processor, software program that would highlight misspelled words in red so you could correct them. Gilbert made a special printer cord that was a flat ribbon of many wires, and a certain one of the wires had to be crossed to work. It then hooked to my Selectric pinwheel typewriter, and I could print letter-quality papers that were acceptable to turn in at college. You had to load the program off a floppy disk every time you booted the computer, and you had to save your work on a floppy disk because the Atari computer had no real memory. By today's standards, it was a cumbersome system, but it worked. I took my studies seriously. I had more discipline than the first time I tried going to college because of being in the Marines. The first semester I made all A's and B's, but got a C in introductory algebra. A guy named Glenn started to come over to my house. He was 20 but liked to drink scotch. I was 22, and he would get me to buy him a certain brand of scotch. Texas had raised the drinking age from 19 to 21 while I was in the Marine Corps. I tried the scotch but did not like it. Alcohol made me hear the voices I call the weather radio. So, I was not a big drinker back then. I did not really start drinking until the 1990s when I began to self-medicate with beer. I was not paid any Veterans Educational Assistance Program money during the first semester at San Jac South. But when I had passed all my classes the first semester, I got $1,200. After that, while I was in school, I got $300 a month. I had smoked a little marijuana with Rick and Glenn, and even though it made me hear the weather radio voices, I liked it. But I did not know where to get it, because everyone I knew were now Pentecostals. I mostly kept to myself and went to college. I took summer classes at San Jac South and passed those as well, except intermediate algebra, which I had to drop because I was failing it. The fall semester I made the dean's honor roll with all A's, but I did not take algebra that semester. During the spring semester, I took a full load of classes as usual and tried intermediate algebra again, but again I had to drop it. I got a C in philosophy that semester, so I did not make the dean's honor roll. I kept seeing a young lady walking down the hall after our class. I had a class on one side of the campus and then drama class on the other side of the campus, and I kept seeing a young lady I did not know. Finally, one day, she came up and talked to me. In high school, David and I had made a clay animation film with an 8mm camera I had. We would show this movie to friends and play a Kraftwerk song for the background sound. She had seen this movie when she was in high school and had been following me. David had slept with her in high school, but David slept with every girl I knew, it seemed. Her name was Linda, and she had a boyfriend she did not like but felt obligated to, and he lived one street over from my parents' house where I lived. She would come over to my house to study, and we would sit right next to each other. Then she would go to her boyfriend's house after. It really messed with my emotions. I would see her coming down the street in her car thinking I would see her, but she would turn and go to his house. The summer of 1987, I told her to stay away from me and threw away a book she had loaned me. I was taking a full summer class load and did not have time for mind games. I began to hang around the students in drama class, and I met a young lady named Kim there. Chapter 36, First Marriage. The summer of 1987, after the ordeal with Linda, I began to go to parties at Kim's apartment. She had a boyfriend that was a heavy-set guy, but he was a director in the theater. They had drifted apart but never had officially broken up. I had known Kim from high school drama class. I found her attractive. Plus, David had not slept with her. She had a party one day at her third-floor apartment. It overlooked a swimming pool, and there was a freeway you could see just past it. This guy named Jerry, who I knew from the drama camp at Southwest Texas State University, said it was like the ocean with the view of the water and the noise from the freeway replicating the noise of the waves. I stayed behind at her place after everyone had left and we started making out. I tried to make love with her, but I was a 23-year-old virgin, and I was too nervous to perform. She thought it was because I had a girlfriend, but it was because it was all new to me. I went back the next night, and we made love. It was my first time. She told me almost straight away that we were going to get married. She told me I was going to buy her an engagement ring. She took me to the jewelry store and picked the ring out. It was all her idea. I went along with it because I thought I had to. She was the first woman I was with, and I only wanted one. I was still going to San Jac South and living on my Veterans Educational Assistance Program money. I told her that I was going to complete college, and I told her that I occasionally smoked pot, and if that were okay with her, we could get married. She said it was. She planned a wedding for August of 1988. Kim moved to a new apartment further down the Gulf Freeway, and I moved in with her. I had to help her move, and we made several trips in our small cars moving stuff. Some theater friends helped move some large items with a truck. On one of the trips, I was moving her grill, but I did not clean out the ash, and it fell over when I was on the freeway and filled my car with a cloud of gray ash smoke. It was a mess. The guy she was dating was named John, and he was okay with our relationship, as he no longer had any romantic interest in Kim. Kim was friends with Duncan, a guy I was in the Texas Hot Shots with and who had gone to my high school. I asked Kim why she did not date him romantically, and she said that he would call her a bitch, and she would not date anyone who would do that. But they were good friends. Duncan was good friends with John and was in a musical that he was directing. I volunteered to work on this musical. It was in downtown Houston at the Houston Community College. The musical was a big production. It was on the 20th century and was about a train. I helped build the sets, and during the run of the show, I manned the rails and pulled the scenery in and out by pulling on the ropes of the rail system. I wanted to be different, so I grew out a flap of hair that fell over my eyes. I went alone to a party that the tech people had from the musical. There were a lot of gay men there. I gave a guy a ride home and he thought I was gay by the cut of my hair. I pulled into his apartment and he was saying, "There's some sisters over there," and things like that. I dropped him off and was lost. It took me 2 hours to make it back to the apartment. I still remember most of the words to most of the songs from the show. The apartment Kim and I lived at was near an open field. My school hours meant I was alone for some of the time during the day. She had gotten a job at the Men's Warehouse, which was a men's dress suit company, so she was gone during the day. I would explore the field behind the apartment. There was an abandoned brick building and a stack of old tires back there. I did this until one day I got ticks on me. I saw them crawling all over me. I rushed back to the apartment and got in the shower and made sure they were all gone. Occasionally, when I was alone at this apartment, I would hear the weather radio voices, but my schizophrenic symptoms were mild, and I never told Kim. I never told anybody. We lived there for 6 months, and then she moved to another apartment. Again, we moved most of our stuff in our 2 little cars, but we had help from Jerry and a truck he had to move the bed and larger stuff. We put the plants in the back of Jerry's truck on one trip and drove them down the freeway, and they got thrashed in the wind. We moved all the boxes and stuff and had put it in the new apartment in no order. I was exhausted and went to my parents' house to take a break. By the time I got back, Kim had arranged everything and unpacked all the boxes. She lived there for 6 months, and then we moved into a rented starter house near San Jac South. It was getting close to our wedding date. Kim was happy for the previous year planning her wedding. She bought a book that outlined who had to do what and who had to pay for it. Kim was remarkably close to her grandmother, and we were invited to have dinner with her grandparents. We went to their house to have her grandfather's okra gumbo. I was eating, and something suddenly made me feel not right. I stopped eating and did not eat another bite. When I got to our house, I felt so bad I had to lay down. I had a throbbing headache and felt sick to my stomach. I thought at the time that something must have gotten in my food, like some kind of insecticide on the okra her grandfather had grown. I am convinced now that her grandfather poisoned me. Kim had told him that I shot myself in the foot, and that is how I got out of the Marine Corps. I never explained to her much about it. Also, I had an odd haircut, and I think he did not like me. This was the first time I was poisoned. Today, I am sure that that was the case. Her wedding was approaching. I say her on purpose because it was all her idea. I went along with it because I felt obligated to the first woman I had been with. I cut the flap of hair off my head and got a regular haircut for the wedding. For years after getting out of the Marines, I had dreams where I needed a haircut. It came time to pick 3 groomsmen. Kim told me to ask this guy in drama class, and I did. I chose Gilbert to be my best man because he was my friend longer than anyone else. I chose Duncan because he was a good friend to us both. Then I wanted David to be in my wedding, but I had asked the guy Kim told me to ask. So, I told the guy that he was not going to be a part of my wedding, and he was upset. It was awkward. I bought the groomsmen's gifts. I did not have much money as Kim took all I made from VEAP, Veterans Educational Assistance Program. My dad gave me $100, and I got some tiny Tanto-style folding knives at Baybrook Mall. The rehearsal dinner was at Mingarelli's, which was a restaurant run by a friend's family. I met him at Atkinson Elementary School. The wedding was at a Presbyterian church in Sagemont A neighborhood, next to Beverly Hills where I was from. We had a rented white Cadillac to drive away in. At the ceremony, as her dad was walking her down the aisle, she looked like she was having second thoughts, but she went through with it, and we were married. We drove off in the Cadillac to a hotel in Clear Lake near NASA. We went on a honeymoon to San Antonio, Texas, and stayed at the Hilton. We had an expensive dinner with an $8 salad and went to the zoo in San Antonio. I was married. I thought it was forever. I saw no way out of it as I had made a solemn promise to love, honor, and cherish until death. Chapter 37, Divorce. Shortly after our wedding, my wife was asked to go to Texas A&M University and audition for the drama program. Her younger sister was a student in this program, and the Texas A&M Drama Department had reached out to my wife Kim. We went to the Texas A&M University at College Station near Bryan, Texas, and she auditioned. They made me audition also, and I did not know about this beforehand. I was not prepared. I had to go on a big stage and speak to the theater staff, who were in the audience section, from a microphone. I said everything wrong. I was interested in being a technician in the theater, and I said that, but I also said I wanted to major in literature. I did not make a good impression. My wife Kim was not accepted into that theater program. We went to some student housing and met a guy from England, and he offered us some hot tea. I tried to drink the hot tea straight away and burnt my mouth badly. It was the worst time I ever burnt my mouth drinking something hot. I had over 64 hours of college credit from San Jac South Junior College. The only classes I needed to get a 2-year degree were a science class and college algebra. I had taken intermediate algebra 3 times, but had yet to pass it, and it was the class you had to pass before you could take college algebra, which I needed for my degree. Still, I had enough credits to get accepted at the University of Houston at Clear Lake, which was a 2-year senior college where students could complete the final 2 years of their bachelor's degrees. I enrolled for the fall semester of 1988 at the University of Houston at Clear Lake. I still had money that would come from my Veterans Educational Assistance Program, so I did not have a job this first semester of senior college. I took 2 literature classes and 2 theater classes and a technical writing class that semester. Technical theater and rehearsal and performance were the 2 theater classes that I took. Script analysis and poetry analysis were the 2 literature classes that I took, and technical writing was considered a business class. That was 15 hours of classes, which was a big load, with 12 hours being the normal load. The rehearsal and performance class at the theater program at the University of Houston at Clear Lake was not like what its title sounded like. You had to work in the theater shop for 12 hours a week. You could do these hours by being an actor in a play, but serious actors were the ones who auditioned for the plays at the University of Houston at Clear Lake. I went to an audition for a play and was totally outclassed by the acting levels of the other students and actors who auditioned. They had studied the character of the play that they wanted to get the role of and were familiar with the entire script. I had only read part of the script and was totally unprepared for an audition on that level. So, I spent my 12 hours a week working in the theater shop. The first thing I had to do in the theater shop was collaborate with a guy that worked there named Kenny building a coffin. The project went well, although it took some time to figure out cutting the trim that was around the coffin lid. A few days later, Kenny told me he was gay, but that did not bother me. There was a girl I knew from Beverly Hills Intermediate School named Connie in the theater at the University of Houston at Clear Lake. At Beverly Hills, she hung around the cool kids and was way out of my league. I told her I had gotten married, and she said, "Why?" The main set designer was a professor named Jeff. He was a teaching professor, and the theater shop foreman was a lady named Linda. She had a degree but did not teach any classes besides rehearsal and performance. That was who I worked for during my time in that class. I took my schoolwork seriously and kept my grades up during the fall semester of 1988. However, my money from the Veterans Educational Assistance Program was not coming in. I had to get money from my dad for gasoline for my car to get to school. Down the street from the house we rented was Duke and Natalie's house, and they were big pot smokers. I used to go down there, and they would smoke a little with me, but I never had money to buy any, so this was few and far between because I did not want to be a mooch. The pot would make me hear the weather radio voices, but I liked the way the pot made me feel. I still never told anyone about the voices. Kim had been supporting us with her job. Towards the end of the semester, she told me they were hiring at a video rental store, but I was in the middle of finals and had papers due and did not go and apply for that job. It had been over 3 months since I had an income. We were living off the money Kim made. One day I was being silly and said something like, "We can live on love." She angrily shot back, "We are living on my hard work." One night she had gone out with a guy we knew from the theater at San Jacinto South named John. This was a different John than the guy she was dating before we met, but he was also heavy set. She was gone all night. I was alone and I was hearing the weather radio voices, but it was not a bad episode. When she came home the next morning after being gone with John all night, she told me that Jerry had been put in jail and they were trying to get him out. I did not believe her, but I was not angry or anything. She used to go to a hotel bar and have one-night stands before I ever met her. so I knew she had that tendency. She had taken me to that bar when we first started dating. Jerry found out and made them change their story. So now she and John had just gone to a party. I knew she had cheated on me with him, but I was not angry. I guess in all truth that deep down I did not love her because I did not care, but I still saw no way out of the marriage. I had made a vow for better or worse, and I was going to keep it. One night she ran out on the porch and started crying. I went out there to comfort her, and she looked at me like I could not comfort her and told me, "I don't think I want to be married anymore." When I asked her why, she said she did not want to be married to a pot smoker. This was one of the first things I told her when we first got together. I did not say anything, but I thought to myself, then why did you put me through a wedding and such? The whole thing was her idea. A few days later, she threw a party and invited her friends from work. Everybody was dancing and having an enjoyable time, and then, in the middle of it all, she left with some guy from her work and drove off with him in his truck. I was left there with all her friends. None of my friends had been there. It was awkward to say the least. I began to hear the weather radio voices and just sat there on the couch. Her friends all left, and I called David, my friend from third grade who I had seen in Korea. We packed up my clothes and I took my stereo that I had gotten when I was in the Marines. I left everything else. We had gotten a lot of wedding gifts which were household items, and I let her keep all of it. I moved back into my parents' house. I passed all my classes at senior college that semester, which ended a few days after the party. I had made A's in my theater classes and B's in my literature classes and a C in my technical writing class. On the last day of rehearsal and performance class, Linda, the shop foreman, asked me if I wanted a job at the theater as Kenny was quitting. I said yes, and had a job working 20 hours a week making over $5 an hour, which was more than minimum wage at the time. A few days after the semester had ended, and less than 2 weeks after the party, Kim called me and said I had gotten a check for my Veterans Educational Assistance Program money. It was $1,200 and was all the money I was owed for the semester. They had held it because I was in a new school, and they would not disperse it until I had passed my first semester. It was made out to my name, so she called me. I went over there. She was inside with all her drama friends. They all started going shh, 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 like making sounds to be quiet. John was over there and went out of his way to try to gaslight me by saying he was still a virgin. I felt like saying, then why did you need such a big lie about Jerry going to jail if it was just a party? Why not just tell me you both went to a party? But I kept my mouth closed and did not say anything to anybody. She walked me outside, and while going down the driveway, she put her arm around my waist. She asked if I was going to give her some of the money. I asked her, "Can I come back?" She said, "No." And I said, "Then it is my money," and took the check and left her standing in the driveway. The way I see it, that was our money, but there was no "our" anymore. It was just me. If I was going to divide the check between us, then I should take all the household items from the wedding and divide those also. To me, it was her wedding, and I had let her keep everything. I did not feel bad. I had a clear conscience. About a month later, I went back over there. She had filed for divorce, and I went to sign the papers. The only thing the papers said was that the cause of the divorce was irreconcilable differences, and that we each owned our own cars. I was not married anymore. I had been married for less than 4 months. She had not even given me one full semester at senior college to get my act together before she started cheating on me. Chapter 38, Theater Job. Everyone who remembers my mom remembers what a wonderful person she was to everybody. However, she had problems that were hidden from the world. She would go to her friend Aileen's house and drink beer, and when she was drunk, she was mean to my father. My father was a very easygoing man and was faithful to my mother for her whole life. I think something happened to my mom when she was a child. Her mother died when she was 2 years old. Her father died when she was 14, and I never knew how he died. My grandparents on my mother's side are a mystery to me. But for some reason, my mom hated men, and this showed in the way she treated my father. After I left Kim because she was cheating on me and running off with other men, I moved back into my parents' house. When my mom was drunk, she would relentlessly ask me what I did to ruin my marriage. She would not leave it alone. She would not give me a moment of peace. I had done nothing to call for getting a divorce. I had been faithful in my wedding vows. But my mom would not leave me alone about it. She just wanted to know what I did to ruin the marriage. One night she would not leave me alone. She kept asking, "What did you do?" in an accusatory tone repeatedly. The stress got to me and I started hearing voices. This was not the common weather radio mumbling that did not make any sense. These were voices like when I had accidentally shot myself. They were screaming in my head, "It was you! It was you!" All the while, my mom was still hounding me with her accusing questions. I got so upset that I took a thick broom handle and smashed it straight through the door to my room. The sad thing was, that door had been damaged, and my father had just replaced it, and I had just put a hole right through it. I felt terrible when I did that to my father. He just hung a picture inside my door and made a plaque that said, "Crew Quarters," and hung it on the outside of my door to cover the hole. He was mad, but I think he understood how my mom could be and never mentioned it after the initial time when he found out about the hole. I started my job at the University of Houston at Clear Lake Theater in the beginning of the spring semester of 1989. I worked 20 hours a week and I had enrolled in school there at the college again. Connie, the girl from Beverly Hills Intermediate School, was in the theater shop a lot. I told her I was getting divorced. It had not been completed yet, and she started to hang around with me. She smoked pot and we would go out on the nature trail and smoke pot out there. She always had pot. Everybody that worked at the theater smoked pot. It did make me hear the weather radio voices, but the symptoms were mild, and I liked the euphoric feeling pot gave me. I was good at what I did while working in the theater. Jeff or Linda could just vaguely describe what they needed, and I could produce it. I had gotten an A in Jeff's technical theater class and could do anything they needed. Connie and I hung around together more and more. She lived in Beverly Hills within walking distance of my parents' house. She was very artistic. One day she drove me home, and when I was getting out of her car, she told me that she had a boyfriend. She said she did not want to lead me on. This news caused me to hurt inside with emotional pain. When I went to bed, I heard voices worse than the weather radio mumbling. Still, she spent a lot of time together with me, and I went to her house on occasion. Her older brother did not like me. His friend was her boyfriend. Her brother was never mean to me, but I could tell he did not like it when I was around. Her brother would buy weed by the quarter pound. That is why Connie always had pot. We would work on art projects at her house. One time she called and asked to borrow my hot melt glue gun. I grabbed it and walked to her house. The Houston police pulled up and stopped me. Someone reported a guy walking with a gun. I showed them the hot melt glue gun, and after they ran my driver's license and saw I had no warrants, they let me go. One day, Connie called and told me to come over. Her cat Gracie had just had kittens. I went over there, and Dave, her boyfriend, was there. He had come over unexpectedly. I quickly looked at the kittens and then left. She broke up with her boyfriend. She told me she always knew she would. She also told me she could not promise to stay with me forever. Her family had a parade float in Mardi Gras in Galveston, and I was in the parade with them. We went to her brother's land in the hill country for a weekend, and then we were driving to go to the Guadalupe River, and my father's car that we had taken broke down. Her brother and I towed it back to her brother's land, and my brother, my dad, and I had to drive all the way to get it and tow it back home on a rented car hauler trailer. I worked at the University of Houston at Clear Lake Theater the rest of the semester, but Connie was messing with my mind, and I had dropped all my classes but one, which was Jeff's scene design class. I could not concentrate on my schoolwork as I was in love with Connie. But she told me one day I was not man enough for her, and she was going to go be with a woman, which confused me. We stopped hanging out together after that. I thought that if I had a home of my own, I could attract a woman to me. I was so used to never having money when I was engaged and then married that I saved most of the money I made. I had $2,000 to spend. I went looking for a plot of land thinking I would build my own house. I saw a plot of land and took down the phone number and called about it. The agent Bill said that that plot was sold, but that he had other plots of land. I was looking south of Houston in Brazoria County. He took me to a 10-acre parcel of land that was divided into 3 lots. The lot on the end had a dry canal that had a water rights easement through the lot I was looking at. The lots in the parcel were $5,000 an acre, but since the end lot was less desirable, I could get it for $4,500 an acre. Because I had $2,000, which was more than 10% of the price, he was willing to sell it to me, financed for 15 years, with a fee-simple contract where I paid the owner $229 a month for 15 years. I also got a deed of trust and could build on it. When I had originally looked at the property, I walked to the back and saw water lines on the trees and knew it flooded. Everything in Brazoria County flooded. The surrounding land was rice fields. I remembered the house Buchanan and I had gone to in Thailand that was in the swamp and thought I could build something like that. So, I paid the $2,000 and entered a contract and got a deed of trust for the land. The land was unrestricted, and you could build anything you wanted on it. It was perfect. Jeff and I became good friends while I worked at the University of Houston at Clear Lake Theater. Linda had quit as shop foreman and got a job in the properties department of the Alley Theater in Houston. After the semester was over at University of Houston at Clear Lake, she went to work at the Alley Theater. There was a break in employment at University of Houston at Clear Lake Theater, and I had 2 weeks off until I would start the Shaw Festival during the summer. The Shaw Festival was held at the University of Houston at Clear Lake Theater every summer and paid better than my regular job there, and I was hired as a carpenter for it. During the break when I was not working, Linda called and wanted to know if I was interested in being overhired to work for a week at the properties department at the Alley Theater. They needed someone to build fake shrubberies for a play. I said I would love to work there. The Alley Theater is in downtown Houston in a multi-story building. The shop is in the basement, and there is a big elevator to move set pieces up to the main stage. The properties workshop was just off the main shop in the basement. I was tasked with building 3 arborvitae-style trees, which are tall, skinny evergreen trees. I used 3 2x2-inch wooden boards coming out of the base, which looked like a planter. I wrapped chicken wire around each 2x2-inch pole, and then I was given a few boxes of plastic evergreen branches that I wove onto the chicken wire until I had covered the whole structure with branches. The trees were tall, and I had to stand on a ladder for most of the work. When I finished, the trees looked real. The work on Shaw Festival at the University of Houston at Clear Lake Theater began in June of 1989. There were 3 plays done for the Shaw Festival, 2 Bernard Shaw plays, and a children's play. Jeff was the set designer, and Robert was the technical director. He had been hired to replace Linda as shop foreman. He was an idiot, and Jeff hated him. I was hired as a carpenter, but did a lot of technical work. Robert went to design and build a boat that had to roll on the stage with an actor inside it. He cut a lot of plywood, but his design was not even workable, and I had to take over and build the boat. He left the theater area and was working in the computer-aided drafting room somewhere on campus. I made a platform on wheels and cut ribs that came off the platform, making a skeleton for the boat. Then took long strips of cardboard and attached them to the ribs like planks of wood. The boat was a success, but to me it looked like a lady's shoe in shape. Robert came back to the theater shop and had a drawing he did on the computer that showed where 4 speakers were. He was gone a week to do a drawing I could do in minutes by hand with a standard drafting table. I also had to design and make skeleton puppets that actors on stage could manipulate. The skeletons were a considerable success, and Jeff had the art department come and paint them. They were so nice that one of them went to be put on display in a theater museum. Jeff made a big puppet king out of cardboard on a pole that was in the scene with the skeletons. The play was a considerable success. I went back to work in the theater with my normal job after the Shaw Festival was over. I still only had 20 hours a week, and I had to save my whole check, which was $180 every 2 weeks, and combine it with my next check to pay for my land. I decided to get a full-time job and concentrate on building my house.